Hey guys, what's up? Once again welcome to Movie Buzz Limited. Thus, at the beginning of the film, we meet two dinosaurs who are in a relationship. They were faced with 3 eggs, which the baby dinosaurs will shortly hatch from. Soon after, these eggs hatched, and 3 cute dinosaurs emerged. 2 dinosaurs stood tall and were busy among them. Yet there was one dinosaur inside the egg. It was short and didn't want to come out. Arlo was the name given to it by its parents. Then that dinosaur couple takes their offspring out. Then show them around their home. That couple frequently farms and adores each other. And now they have children. They've turned into a cute family. Time passed, and these tiny dinosaurs had grown up. Arlo was not the only dinosaur who was active. They assist their parents. But when Arlo was told to do something, he couldn't. It is terrified of small things. That dinosaur couple is now calling their youngsters to them. They make them realize that winter is approaching. We have a lot of food to store. They've built a storage to keep food in. The father dinosaur then leaves its footprint there. All of the babies were ecstatic. They say that father, we want to leave our mark as well. But the father dinosaur intervenes. It says that no, you are still babies. You couldn't leave your mark until you did a lot of work. The day you realize you have accomplished anything in your life, you can leave your mark on that day. I, too, shall await that day. That is when my children will be like me. And the father dinosaur says that let me inspect you today. And if you accomplish the work that I will assign you nicely, you will be able to set your footprints today. Everyone becomes ecstatic. Yet Arlo was still frightening. While picking up the massive trees, Arlo's brother collects the woods. Arlo's sister also cleans up the farm. They now have permission to leave their imprints. But when it comes to Arlo, nothing has changed. It was powerless to act. As a result, its father forbade it. Arlo is injured. Suddenly its sibling appears and begins to tease it. You can't help that sad little kid. Then Arlo adds that don't do this, I feel horrible. I gave it my all. But I couldn't pull it off. Yet its brother continues to tease it. Then its family shows up. They chastised Arlo's brother. That is not a joke on your brother. Arlo claims that you all believe I am powerless. I'll do something one day. And I'll leave my mark here as well. Arlo's father visits him at night while he is sleeping. Its father instructs it to accompany it. They then begin to walk. This is a very endearing scene. Arlo's father teaches him that you can't do anything until you're terrified. I'd like to alleviate your anxiety. Be certain that nothing will be tough for you. Arlo then falls asleep. When they wake up the next morning, Arlo's father notices that someone has stolen their store of food. This indicates that an animal came there and ate or took all of the food. They were all concerned. Nevertheless, Arlo's father informs him that the time has come for my son to assess your self-assurance. What did you take away from my words? What did you discover? It is your responsibility to bring that animal, the creatures who take our food. You must catch it in the net. You must then eliminate it. And if you do this, I'll let you leave your mark. Arlo was pleased to find out. Arlo's father assists in the traps set up. Arlo then waits for that animal. The corns are placed in the location where the trap was set. Then a wild child appears and begins picking the corn. This suggests that the thief was not an animal, but rather that crazy child. Arlo hastily deploys its trap on him. That kid got caught in the net. He does, however, scream a lot. He was pleading in his tongue to let me go. As Arlo sees and hears him, he is terrified and wonders what weird monster he is. When bewildered, it lifts the trap. That wild child flees from there. When Arlo's father shows up, what had you done? It chastises. You leave him after catching him. Everything has been wrecked by your dread. Quit being afraid and follow me. Allow me to dispel your apprehension. Arlo's father was not scolding him for no reason. It also wants to make its kid a decent lad. It becomes frightening to the rest of the world. It is not afraid of the world. Parents chastised us for our good behavior. Arlo's father transports it to a wilderness. And then it begins to rain. The sky was overcast. Arlo becomes terrified. It tells its father, "Father, let us go back. The weather isn't cooperating." Its father tells it to be quiet and walk with him. The sky was filled with terrifying thunderclaps. Arlo's heart was pounding. Because he lacked courage. They were slipping on the stones again and again since it was raining. Arlo's foot twists and falls down while walking. It begs its father to please stop. Its father tells it, "I'm sorry I brought my son here. But keep in mind that what will you do when you're older if I don't erase your fear?" That's all for now, let's get back to business. But suddenly it begins to pour heavily. A strong wind indicates that a storm is approaching. The flood is brought down by the stones. Everything was going along with it. Arlo's father requests that it be turned upside down. It uses its lips and tail to turn its son Arlo upside down. As a result, it cannot flow in the flood. Yet, it is still a disadvantage. It is washed away by the water. For a brief moment, the screen goes blank. Because it was a touching scene. Arlo had recently lost its father. Arlo returns to its home from there. It also begins to collaborate with its siblings. It used to be depressing. It saw the same rowdy youngster while it was working. Something clicks in its head. That its father orders him to be apprehended and killed. It begins to run towards him. Arlo manages to catch him, but he then falls into the creek. And arrives at a distant location while flowing from there. It was now very faint. When it returns to its senses, it is alone. It was heartbreaking. But then it notices the wild kid. It begins to pursue him and appears on the upside. But suddenly it notices the stream. It is moving towards its destination. Then it recalls what its father said. That you are not terrified when you see the stream. Because you will find your way back home. It begins wandering alongside the creek. Yet it was ravenous. It notices a fruit. It was perched atop a tree. Arlo begins eating the fruit while keeping its feet on a stone. But then the stone falls. Then Arlo falls through the stone. Arlo's foot had become wedged in those stones. It makes numerous attempts to break away. But, it was unable to free itself. Even though the day has passed, night has arrived. And Arlo is sleeping. As it wakes up in the morning, however, it discovers that its foot has been freed. Someone dug a hole there. There were also little footprints all around it. It recognizes these as the footprints of that wild child. And he releases Arlo. Arlo stands up with courage. It begins by constructing a shelter in which it will live while collecting wood. Then that wild youngster shows up again. He brings Arlo a lizard. Because it was starving. But Arlo tells him to keep that lizard away. Arlo is also terrified by it. Because it was the lizard in the wild. Then that kid brings a large insect after it. He pulls its head away from his mouth. And tells it to consume it. But, Arlo does not consume it. Because it is vegetarian and only consumes plants, fruits, and trees. The child then realizes what it desires to eat. He brings the fruit that Arlo saw. Because Arlo was hungry, it ate it quickly. That child understands what it desires. He takes it to a location where there was a tree of that fruit. On that tree, there were a lot of berries like this. Arlo's mouth begins to water. It immediately approaches it. But that kid puts a stop to it. We couldn't figure out why he stopped at first. When Arlo approaches that tree, a massive snake emerges. It was about to pounce on Arlo. However, the wild child attacks the snake. There was a fight between them, and at least one of them was scared and fled. They were now on their way to somewhere. Meanwhile, a massive animal emerges from the woods and shrubs. It had some birds perched on its horns. "Who is that kid with you?" it asks Arlo. They can communicate because they are animals. Arlo claims that I don't know what his name is. It instructs Arlo to name him. Then Arlo says Spot so that wild kid turns back and see. Perhaps he likes this name. Arlo becomes Spot's friend. They begin to walk together. Arlo, in fact, was on his way home. However, it was unable to comprehend the path. They then pass through an area with long grass. Arlo moves its tail through the grass. There are so many fireflies coming out of that grass. They initially become happy. Suddenly Arlo recalls that its father did the same thing to make Arlo happy. It becomes depressing once more. Arlo sits down, depressed. Arlo is supported on the mud by 5 little chunks of wood. Then bury the large wood in the mud. This implies that Arlos was informing Spot about its family. We were 5 at the time, but my father died. When it sees no reaction from Spot, it becomes depressed once more. That's who I'm telling. Spot then stands up and places 3 chunks of wood in the mud. He lays down 2 large chunks of wood in the mud. And he becomes depressed when he sees the small piece of wood. Because he was that insignificant bit of wood. He wishes to state that his parents were murdered and that he is alone in the world. They sit and cry, hugging one another. The next day, they set out on their next journey. But then comes the storm. It begins to pour heavily. It was the same flood that killed its father. It becomes terrified and flees from there. It hides beneath a tree. When it wakes up, it realizes it is far from the stream. It wasn't seeing any streams. It can use this to look for his house. It becomes depressing. And begins to go onward. It then notices strange birds. They appear to be intelligent birds. Arlo asks them if they can tell him where the stream is. "I'd like to return home." "How would we know?" say the birds. "We have no connection to it. We come out to devour the birds that died as a result of a storm or flood." Arlo is asked a question by those strange birds. "Have you seen that wild child? So please tell us." Arlo was terrified of them now. Because the birds devoured a small fox-like animal in front of Arlo. Arlo, terrified, informs them where Spot is. But, when it notices that those birds are pursuing them. So Arlo begins to sprint while forcing Spot to sit on its back. Then there are large dinosaurs in front of them. They were even bigger than Arlo's parents. As a result, Arlo becomes terrified and begins running on the other side. Then a massive dinosaur appears, who was the parent of those dinosaurs. It calls Arlo back and tells him not to be afraid because they are also vegetarian. Then Arlo asks if it can tell him where the stream is. "I'd like to return home." "Now, I'll tell you what it says. But something happened to me. My cows had been stolen. First and foremost, you both assist me in locating my cows." They've all started looking for the cows now. They locate the cows. Now, the big dinosaur claims that here is the location where my cows are standing. There are also thieves among them. "Are you seeing a stone there?" it asks Arlo. "Scream over there. So that the cow thieves will come out." It was terrified. So it had to look for a place to live. As a result, it had to go there. Its voice was solo as it stood in the stone and began screaming. It does not appear to be a dinosaur. Spot then bites its foot. And now we hear Arlo's true voice. It yells angrily. The cow thieves emerge while listening to its speech. These were the weak dinosaurs that looked like frightening birds. As they emerge, the gigantic dinosaurs follow them. And begins to assault them. They have a lot of fights. Finally, the frail and scary dinosaurs flee. The enormous dinosaurs proceed from there, bringing their cows with them. Arlo and Spot were also present. Then, at night, they sat around the fire, talking to one another. The enormous dinosaur was telling them that I had a lot of power. And began recounting the story of its might. That I have completed this or that task. Arlo claims that my father was equally as powerful as you. And you know what? It wasn't scared. That massive dinosaur screams, "No way, my son. That no one is afraid. It is natural for everyone to be afraid. The actual challenge is to conquer it. Walk with your fear, but don't allow it to control you." As you learn how to tackle challenges, you will instantly become stronger. Don't worry, we'll depart for your place first thing in the morning. Arlo is now content. Then, as promised, everyone, including the enormous dinosaur's cows, move to leave Arlo at home. They stroll till they reach a point where their heads are in the clouds. They could see the mountains ahead of them. There was a creek alongside the mountains. This meant Arlo's house was close by. That gigantic dinosaur says to Spot and Arlo that "Kids, I have brought you here. We have to return. You can now safely return home." Arlo becomes happy and jumps towards that side. Arlo and Spot begin talking loudly. Because they were content. But then we see that a wild human was also communicating in their language. The Spot was fixed on that guy. Arlo grabs Spot as he approaches. It forces him to sit on its back and then goes onward. It gets to those stones. Yet those scary birds again come there. They seize Spot and drag him along with them. Arlo attempts to set him free. But, it fails. Arlo was now trapped amid the wild trees. That was extremely stuck. Arlo becomes depressed. Then its father appears in front of it. Arlo quickly frees himself from the tree's entanglement. It begins to follow its father. It states that while viewing its father, you returned. You were present. But, Arlo discovers that its tracks were present on the damp mud but not its father's. This suggests it was all in its head. But its father has told in its imagination that you had to hunt for Spot. Arlo himself desired to look for Spot. Because he was missing. Arlo advances and begins yelling. Suddenly it notices that those frightening birds are attempting to attack Spot while he is being placed in the woods. Spot, on the other hand, was lurking in the woods. The first time someone becomes Arlo's friend. When he sees him in this state, he becomes hostile. Arlo is adult and aggressive for the first time in this scene. Arlo screams angrily. But then comes the flood. Everything was going along with it. Arlo is unconcerned about it. And it dives into the stream. Spot has been saved. It somehow removes Spot out of the stream. Nonetheless, its body was severely injured. This indicates that it was severely harmed. They proceed from there. The Spot was sitting on Arlo's back. Then he sees that crazy human once more. Arlo lets him go to that man this time. Spot then leaps from its tail and sprints towards the wild human. He recognizes him as my father. His mother and siblings were also in attendance. Spot is adored by his father. He forces him to sit in his lap. As Arlo witnesses this heartbreaking scenario, it recalls its family. And it becomes sad. Then Spot rushes over to it. And then sits on it. This suggests he still intends to use it to find Arlo's family. He wants to go along with it. Arlo tells him to go to his family while keeping him away from its mouth. This is your domain. You deserve to be loved and cared for. They say their final goodbyes. Unwillingly, Arlo is now moving closer to its family. Arlo keeps traveling till it sees its house in front of it. It begins to cry. Its mother and siblings appear from the front as well. They cross paths. But they were also missing their family's leader, Arlo's father. Arlo's mother thinks you did an excellent job. It is the day you will realize your father's dream. It was stated that when you have completed excellent task, you can leave your mark on that day. Come in and leave your mark. Arlo begins to smile. It had realized its father's desire. It takes up the characteristics of its father. Its father was not present, but it will always be powerful. And will never forget its father. It also leaves its mark in the same way that its father did. With this conclusion, the film's plot comes to an end. I hope you enjoyed this film.